The transfer window is fast approaching, and that means only one thing. In today's Arsenal transfer show, hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal transfer show. Joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you so much as always for joining me. I've missed that little title sequence. The red, kind of the graphic and the Arsenal transfer logo as we've got on the screen as well. It's been a long season and it's over now, and we know where Arsenal stand. We know what's happened and we know what's needed. Some of the things are still needed from last summer, of course. But hopefully, indeed, this is going to be a big one for Arsenal. And we're going to be here for pretty much every single day of the summer, talking about it, learning about it, breaking news from it, and discussing all the ins and outs of what goes on. Good morning to you all. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. Really appreciate you all being here. Apologies for there being no 8 a.m. show yesterday. I was at a funeral, so unfortunately I wasn't able to do that. However, in the evening, we did conduct our first, well, I say first, probably our last of last season. It was kind of a phone-in show roundup of people's feelings from the season, but also a first of the summer because it did look ahead to people's thoughts and feelings. So if you've not yet caught up on that, it is available, of course, for you to listen to on audio platforms, but also on the YouTube channel as well. So go give it a listen if you haven't done so already after this morning's show. Good morning to those joining us in the chat box. We've got Spearman and Sorrel. We've got Stephen and Believe. We've got GZ4. We've got Arasilki and James. We've got Matt G, Kirill, Tom, Ashley. Good morning to you, to Claire, to Di. We've got Graham. We've got Easter, Simple Unity in the chat box. Rob, David, Black Shine. Good morning to Belathu. Good morning to Ant. And plenty more of you guys and girls in the chat box as well. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. Greatly appreciate you all being here. And, of course, for your kind comments and words yesterday also. But today being the first of the summer in terms of Arsenal transfer shows, I thought the best thing to do was do something of a state of play, a roundup of what we know so far, a roundup of each position, each area of the squad that needs addressing, and the information that we have right now. Certainly my understanding, of course, more of a broader understanding of others as well. So let's not waste any time. Please do drop a like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel if you're new, with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. So let's start from back to front. We begin in the goalkeeper position, which we know, of course, with Neto leaving the club after his loan spell with the team finished in the game against Southampton, that Arsenal will be on the lookout for another backup goalkeeper. Now, Arsenal, of course, have Karl Hein returning on loan from Real Valladolid, where he spent the entire season, played pretty much every single game for them, conceded a lot of goals, unsurprisingly, because they are the worst team in the division. But he had a really good experience and gained some good qualities and development there. However, it is not certain whether or not he is going to get, well, effectively not going to get a position in the squad next season. We don't know whether or not we're going to see Karl Hein in the team. His future remains up in the air. There hasn't been much clarity at all on his situation. And that is because Arsenal are still keen on signing a number 2 goalkeeper this summer. Now, we've known for some time that Juan Garcia, the Spanish, well, he's a Spanish youth international, kind of still breaking through into the senior setup, but having played with Espanyol for some time now. Last summer, Arsenal in the latter stage of the window were in talks with Espanyol. The player was pretty much ready to move, bags packed, personal terms are all but done, if not done. And of course, Arsenal have put a lot of work into that deal. However, his performances this season have drawn the interest of a lot of clubs that believe he could not be just a number 2, but instead could be a number 1. And that, of course, means that Arsenal's position of bringing him in as their number 2 is, of course, certainly, it's difficult to see that happening. And so Arsenal, I think, are unlikely to land Juan Garcia this summer. If they do, it would be quite the, it would be certainly probably quite surprising now to see this happen. And so I think Arsenal will look elsewhere. If that is Karl Hein, it remains to be seen. But I think Arsenal will be looking elsewhere into terms of that number 2. and whether or not they move for another goalkeeper in the early stages, or maybe they'll wait for a market opportunity later in the window. As soon as we know more on this front, we will, of course, discuss it. But at this point in time, a deal for Juan Garcia is unlikely from an Arsenal point of view. Moving into the defence, and this is, I think, probably, other than the goalkeeper scenario, which in turn we obviously have some insight into that because of the Garcia situation, as we've discussed there. But the defender side of things is probably the most elusive, less talked about part of the scenario, because Arsenal definitely are keen on adding a defender this summer. We know that because obviously Kieran Tierney has departed. We know that because Alexander Zinchenko's situation this summer remains open, and he, I think, is more likely to move on than to stay. We know that there was interest from Borussia Dortmund in the previous summer window, and that did lean into January, but nothing ended up happening. He doesn't have long left to run on his contract. Jakub Kiwior also remains a very interesting profile for the summer. We know there's been growing interest in Italy over the course of the last 2 years in Kiwior, and his performances at the end of this season that we have just seen have changed the view of Jakub Kiwior in the minds, I think, of supporters, but potentially also the minds of those within the club. And I think if they had a preference, they'd probably want to keep him. That said, it is my understanding that if a significant offer was to arrive for Jakub Kiwior, it would be very hard to turn that down. In terms of players that were aware that Arsenal have an interest in this area, Dean Housen, of course, was one of those players. Arsenal did indeed have quite significant interest in Dean Housen, and The Athletic wrote the story that offers were made and discussions were had, and a very reasonable offer was made toward the player. But it was always his preference to make the switch to Real Madrid, and that is, of course, what is happening this summer. We know that the man you can see on your screen here, Joel Hato of Ajax, is another player that Arsenal have been very keen on for quite some time. Really has impressed at such a young age for Ajax, playing, of course, plenty of games at only 19 years of age, but made his debut, of course, at a much younger age than that. And, of course, now Hato is still a player that Arsenal appreciate, but would be very, very, very expensive for Arsenal to get their hands on. He signed a new contract this season just gone, which removed the lower end of the price tag range for him. So if Arsenal want to get their hands on your Hato, I think they'd have to pay quite big money. He's more of a left-sided defender, which would make sense if Zinchenko and Tierney have just left to bring in more depth there. But you could argue with the injury issues that both that Jurrien Timber and, of course, Ben White have suffered, that maybe they need to look to the right-hand side. Tomiyasu is not expected back until the end of the year. And even then, who knows what's going to happen. But, of course, the defender side of things, it is probably the most open area when it comes to Arsenal and looking into signing a player in that area, because it could be a very different player than the one, of course, that we find ourselves in right now. So let's wait and see on the defender side of things, but it's one that remains open, I think, toward the end of the season, end of the summer, sorry, unless they find someone sooner than that. The midfield, we know that a deal for Martin Zubimendi is all but done. Arsenal, of course, are expected to land the Spanish international this summer, with the window opening on June 1st early through till June 10th. If there is a deal that Arsenal could confirm in that time, it is most likely to be a deal for Martin Zubimendi. He comes in and is hoped to be a very key figure in the team next season. Arsenal are in talks with Thomas Partey over an extension as well, and are looking, of course, also to try and find an agreement there. In last week, there's certainly, as I talked about yesterday, been signs that Thomas Partey seems closer to staying at the club than leaving at this point in time. So the feeling is, at the moment, there is optimism around Thomas Partey staying at the club at least for next season, meaning that Arsenal would have Zubimendi, Rice, and Partey as options, effectively Zubimendi coming in and replacing Jorginho, but of a much higher standard, of course, in the squad, and would be getting plenty of minutes. Stylistically, of course, gives Arsenal a lot better progression of the ball, better in transition, better at kind of moving the ball up the field as well, and effectively has been best number 6 on the market. But all the Real Madrid noise has thankfully kind of died away, and there's not really been any expectation around Real Madrid having a breakthrough on this front. That Zubimendi's word has very much been with Arsenal. and that is a deal that is expected to happen this summer. But there are other areas of the midfield, of course. Attacking midfield has been discussed quite a lot. And you know that I've been very keen on the idea of adding Ebere Eze to the group. It is my knowledge that Arsenal are very conscious of pathways for young players in that area in particular. Ethan Nwaneri, of course, has already made his breakthrough to the squad. He's made over 30 appearances for the club this season. Those noises you've been hearing kind of about being unsettled or Man City, Liverpool lurking, there's nothing in that. What I'm told at the moment, that there's no concern. They're very calm about his future. They're very calm about his contract situation and a renewal, of course, as well for the summer and beyond. But both him and Miles Lewis-Skelly as well, and being rewarded for their breakthrough into the senior setup this season. But the other player that they are obviously looking at as a player that they do not want to block the pathway of is Max Dowman, who is having an excellent under-17s England tournament this summer as well, and he is expected to be part of the squad's plans for pre-season. To my knowledge, it would be a big surprise if he's not part of the squad in pre-season. And as of this season, he can now make his Premier League debut. He is eligible to play in those tournaments because he turns 16 during this upcoming campaign. Legislation-wise, you cannot make your debut at senior level in a competitive sense until you are playing in a season of which you turn 16. That wasn't the case for the season just gone. But yeah, there is kind of awareness that they don't want to block that pathway, especially when it comes to future professional contracts being given, and convincing Max Dowman, of course, to stay at the club for the foreseeable future, having already seen a number of other young players get really big offers from teams like Manchester United with Chido Obi-Martin, and having lost players to that, they don't want to be in that position. So they make sure that they're making sure they sell the pathway to Dowman as well. So that is definitely in the minds of the club when it comes to the midfield moving forwards. In the wide areas, now we kind of had our first indication now from Xabi Alonso about how he feels about Rodrygo, and the signs are that he does want to keep Rodrygo at the club for next season. So if Rodrygo was to become a market opportunity, it would be something of a surprise at this point in time. So it was definitely one that there was kind of a little bit of openness at the beginning of the window about whether his future could lead him to leave, especially if a club like Arsenal could offer him a significant amount of money. Wages were, of course, something being talked about. The other player that, as you can see on your screen here, that Arsenal are obviously very keen on is Nico Williams of Athletic Club. Arteta has always been a big fan of the player, and that interest has not wavered. He has a release clause this summer that can be activated around £50 million plus, that Arsenal could use to bring him to the club without any negotiation with Athletic Club whatsoever. But there is interest from other clubs, Real Madrid being one of those. Barcelona, we know, have had a long-term interest in Nico Williams as well, but Rafinha's form has definitely helped to stave off any desperation to bring in Nico Williams at this point in time. His form this season has not been as strong as it was the previous season. He has been affected by an ongoing injury issue, which he is receiving treatment for over the summer. But there are other players, and it is thought that the wide position is an area where there is plenty of opportunities in terms of players. It's not like the centre-forward position that we'll come on to shortly, where there is a real lack of clear options. The wide areas pertain to having a number of players that could be on the move this summer, such as Rafael Leao, Antoine Semenyo, of course. We know, of course, that Arsenal have interest in Brian Mbeumo, who's more of a right-sided player, but can potentially operate on the left. But there's also interest from Manchester United in him. They've been interested in the past in Matheus Cunha, but he looks destined to move now to Manchester United. He could also have played off the left for Arsenal as well. But there are a number of players that Arsenal could move for during this window. Ademola Lookman has been on the names of the lists that Arsenal have potentially looked at as well. So that is the most open area in terms of kind of high-level options that Arsenal could bring in, but there's definitely a keenness from Arsenal to strengthen that area. And that doesn't mean that Gabriel Martinelli or Leandro Trossard will leave. They both could yet stay. It is about this season adding quality, not replacing players in the squad. It is about ensuring that Arsenal strengthen the team. It is about ensuring that Arsenal improve the numbers in the squad and do not leave Mikel Arteta short when it comes to, of course, next season. That's been the biggest key point of where we are at on that front. Lastly, and of course, the area where most people are concerned about this summer, it's the centre forward. And Arsenal, of course, have two very clear targets for this summer, and that is Victor Gyokeres and Benjamin Sesko. Unfortunately, Alexander Isak, who Arsenal would have loved to have signed, Mikel Arteta in particular, with Newcastle getting Champions League qualification, that has almost ruled out that entirely. Had they missed out on European qualification, maybe there was a slight door being open ajar, but with Newcastle getting that qualification, unlikely he moves. On the front of Gyokeres, he is expected to leave the club this summer. On the front of Leipzig, Sesko, he is also expected to leave the club this summer. But where they will end up remains to be seen. What also remains to be seen is which of these two players Arsenal have a preference for right now. Of course, you probably heard the clip that went a little bit viral of James McNicholas of The Athletic talking on the Arscast about speaking to some people within football and how the expectation is that despite Sesko's being seen as the smart signing, and certainly that's what certainly we've been discussing and what we've been talking about for a little while now as well. That it seems that Gyokeres may be the one that Arsenal go for because they want more of that immediate guarantee of goals, whereas Sesko would require development and improvement and transition time, and it wouldn't be such an immediate kind of guarantee of goals that Gyokeres would potentially give. It is certainly thought that the risk factor in the long term is greater with Gyokeres. He is also cheaper on the market, around 55 to 60 million pounds. And of course, also that Sesko would be of more of an 80 million euro type figure to get him through the door at Arsenal or any club, of course, for that matter. I think Chelsea are very keen on Sesko. I think that's certainly a thread that should be watched. I think that Gyokeres is also being watched by a number of clubs during this window as well, not just Arsenal. It's not preordained that Arsenal will sign one of them. But they are involved in interest in both. But as of the 28th of May, there is not a clear front runner that we are aware of at this stage. Yes, there's been reports of Portugal suggesting 5-year offers being made to Gyokeres. I've heard nothing of the sorts to confirm that news. I've heard nothing to suggest that has happened. Meetings are taking place this week at Arsenal, as we know, between Arteta, Andrea Berta, Josh Kroenke, other executives at the club, where other potential favourites will be finalised and deals, of course, will start to be put forward for potential targets. So hopefully in the coming weeks, not months, but weeks, we will get a lot more clarification on which of these two appears to be the number one. There has been a lot of reports suggesting one over the other, but I would temper your expectations around that right now. It still seems quite open, but it's one of those things that could change in a matter of days, who knows, hours. The transfer window is extremely unpredictable, and we're going to enjoy this ride and hopefully come out of it with one of them. There were reports, and I see in the chat box, about Julian Alvarez. I've heard zero to suggest any realness on that front, I'm afraid. So for those of you that might have been hoping for Julian Alvarez, I've not heard anything on that front. Of course, it doesn't mean it's necessarily wrong, but I think that there's obviously something to be said about the fact that Andrea Berta worked at Atletico Madrid. He was not necessarily a massive figure involved in signing Julian Alvarez. It's my understanding that Diego Simeone was actually more of kind of the factor in landing Julian Alvarez, not Andrea Berta. And it was kind of a real dream of Simeone's to land Alvarez. But I think those reports have maybe been, stoked more because of Berta's presence, just having been at Atletico and now Arsenal needing a centre forward. And of course, he's the centre forward that was signed under Berta's watch at Atletico. So I think that maybe explains that story, but I've heard nothing to suggest that Alvarez will be leaving Atleti this summer. But transfer windows are transfer windows for a reason. It's why I'm not always the keenest on talking about them, because they are so unpredictable and things can change so greatly. But that is, as of now, everything I know, everything we can kind of discuss. But we're going to go to the chat box now and tackle some of your thoughts, some of your questions, some of your comments in part 2, right after this. Okay, this is part 2 of today's show. We'll be jumping into the chat box and tackling some of your questions, some of your thoughts, getting some of your feelings and questions. So now is the time to jump into the chat box and do that. So if you've got a question, now is the time to throw it in. If you could drop a like as well, it takes you just a second. I was tempted to try and kick off like this summer with our 1K like challenge. I am going on holiday in June, so we'll break that. And then, of course, having a big break and then starting again, I'm not sure it's the time to start that off. But if you want to help us and you want to see if we can do it, that'd be great. So please do drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. We'll be live pretty much every single day at 8 a.m. this summer, bringing you all the news, rounding up everything that happens in the window every single day so that you don't have to keep an eye on it. You can just tune in and learn what's happened throughout the day and then, of course, be discussing it as well. Sometimes our chat box can make me aware of things that we've even been able to miss. Incredibly, that is the community here at TGT. So thank you for your listenership, and I'm looking forward to embarking upon another summer transfer window with you. Right, let's go in, shall we, and tackle some of these thoughts. Bakayo Martinelli says, good morning, Tom. When we are looking for a striker and a winger, should we not look for those players whose strengths overcome our current flaws in attack rather than sticking to particular names? I mean, obviously, if Arsenal could craft the perfect player in each role, they would. The reality is that often that doesn't and cannot happen, and that you have to compromise. You have to look at what players fit best your role, but also have to take advantage of the opportunities sometimes that emerge. Sometimes you have to adapt to the players that you sign so you can get the best from them. So it's an open, very fluid situation. It's not as binary as sign that player because he fits, sign that player, or don't sign that player because he doesn't fit. You know, sometimes you have to be moldable, malleable to change to signings to make them work. Jack says, Tom, the biggest question is, how's the cheese plant? Okay. The cheese plant, I maybe shouldn't have put in the shed for like 3 days as I tried to get rid of the situation. Got it out the other day. It was looking a little yellow. I'm hoping I've not killed it. I'll give you an update soon. It's in the house now. It's been watered. It's been treated. Hopefully it'll be fine. But I'm a little concerned. I'm a little concerned. We'll see. I'll give you an update in a few days and see if it survives. I don't want to have to kill another plant. I really don't. Tipsy says, are you aware of a bespoke development program from the strength and conditioning team in Winery? I have a suspicion that might be why we've seen less minutes. Building the body can be taxing. Nothing specific, Tipsy, no. Nothing specific beyond what typically players go through. He, as a young player, has been exposed to a lot more football than players at that age tend to get exposed to in the most physically demanding league in the world. And I think that's taken a toll. He obviously suffered an injury earlier on in the season because of that quick exposure to minutes on such a regular occasion in January. And I think that they've been very careful. You don't want to ruin young players. You don't want to expose them to too much before they can handle it. So they've been very careful with Winery, and they will continue to be very careful with Winery, I think, moving forwards. Temi says, why are we still looking for a new goalkeeper when we already have a multi-Golden Glove winning goalkeeper at the club? Because you need two, Temi. You need a backup. If Raya gets injured, we're screwed. So you need to bring in a second one. Southport Gooner says, Tom, have you heard anything on Lee Kang-in? Odds very strong with bookmakers. It was a player that Arsenal were looking at in January as maybe an opportunity. But other than those links in January, Arsenal are really the only club that have been named in terms of a race in the Premier League for him. Maybe that's why bookmakers have put Arsenal as short as they are, if that's correct. But I've not heard anything for this summer at the moment. But there was genuine interest in the player in January. Temi says, we've done that on. Raz says, Clive has been talking up Ollie Watkins as an impact of an immediate striker. What are your thoughts? We've talked about Ollie Watkins on the channel. I've written a little bit about Ollie Watkins on the channel, on Football London, as well. And I can see why. The two strikers that Arsenal are looking at right now, Sesko and Gyokeres, both of them have lots of upsides, but both of them also have significant risk and doubt associated with them. If Arsenal want to move big money for a wide player in this window instead, that is a reality that we could see. And it's certainly something that I've written about as well. And Ollie Watkins would give Arsenal certainly guarantees in the short term with goals, immediate impact, and things like this. There's been interest in the player. We know that. They made an offer for him in January. It wasn't as much as Villa wanted. Maybe that offer they put in January is more amenable to Villa now, especially after they've missed out on Champions League football. There could be a market opportunity there. So the Watkins story is not over, I don't think. And if indeed they decide that Sesko and Gyokeres is not the right time to move for them, or they're not convinced that either of them are the right ones to go for now, it may be that Watkins is somebody that they still look to kind of pursue. But I imagine that would happen maybe slightly later on, as opposed to in the immediate part of the window. Rich says, you like Sesko over Gyokeres for his ability in closed spaces. I mean, it's not the only reason. It's for that same reason I want Gittins over Williams. Any news on that link? That's gone very quiet, Jamie Gittins. I haven't heard his name come up in discussions at all recently, to be fair, in these circles. So he was someone that was certainly be on Arsenal's radar, but his name's gone a bit quiet recently. And Stephen says, have you heard much surrounding Leao? No, again, Rafael Leao is not someone who I've heard much discussed about, other than those stories from Italy, which I think you have to take with a pinch of salt. He's not who I would go for. I don't think he fits Arsenal's style at all. I don't think he fits Arteta's demands at all. I think defensively he's very weak, of course. Doesn't offer much running and defensive support. And that's a key thing that Arteta looks for in a wide player. And so for that reason, it would be difficult to see Leao coming in. He's very inconsistent as well as a player. And I think Arsenal needs someone who can more consistently deliver week in, week out. Steve says, how has Hein been? He's been okay. Like, he plays, you have to think about the context of where he was last season. Real Valladolid, by far the worst team in La Liga last season. He was exposed to a lot of shots. If you ever look at kind of his FB ref page at the moment, his post-shot expected goals per shot on target was in the 93rd percentile, and that's because it's expected goals based on how likely the goalkeeper is to save that shot, and he ranks very highly, 0.35. So, and that's because he plays for a team that absorb a lot of attempts on goal. But he's done well. Like, he's decent. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for him to be Arsenal's number 2 next season. I really don't think. But I think that what they might need to do is sign, like Man United have done, like with Tom Heaton. I think you need to add kind of an older goalkeeper to be the number 3 on a free contract, somebody like that. Man City have had Scott Carson for quite a long time. I think that's a smart route to go down. So I think I'd go down that route. Who that is, I don't know. Could it be a Lucas Fabianski? We talked about that. I don't think it makes sense for him to be a number 2. But as a number 3, maybe that's something that Arsenal could look to. The process has been a member now with us for 20 months. Thank you so much for your kind support, mate. I know that the debate is Sesko or Gyokeres, but is there any other striker option that you think Arsenal should be looking at? Hugo Ekitike is definitely one that I like, having watched a lot more of him the last couple of months. Ollie Watkins, we've just discussed, of course, there as well. Those two, I think, are definitely 2 players that will be on Arsenal's radar, among others. But it's not a broad market when it comes to the centre forwards. Clive says, Sesko is my choice. I'm more worried about the winger, as that choice is not so easy. And that's because there are more options there. It's easy, of course, when you've got far fewer options to pick from to make a decision. But the wide area, there are a lot of different ways that Arsenal could go for a wide player. They have to go and get one, that's for sure. But there's a lot of ways that could go. Tyser says, with players earning big amounts early on in their career, close to £250,000 per week, when do you stop giving pay rises and look to cash in due to issues it could cause by buying new players as fees plus wages and issues related to that? Arsenal, as more they establish themselves as the title challenger that we know that they are now, and in the latter stage of the Champions League, those types of wages will become more commonplace. Arsenal's revenues will increase, and they will be able to deal with those higher earning players, of course, as well. So it's a bit of a feedback loop. The issue is if you have those higher earners but aren't having much success. Look at Manchester United as a very good example of that. But Arsenal are in a very healthy position financially. They're in a very healthy position competitively as well. So I don't think those type of wages are necessarily too much of a concern if they do grow within the squad at the moment. Lo Lu says, any reason why we aren't going for Osimhen? My assumption would be things outside of just what happens on the field. Of course, there's another reason being the inconsistencies throughout his career. He's only had one in a top 5 league. He's only had one very, 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 very good season, which was when the season Napoli won the league. And of course, they managed to do that last season without Osimhen being in the squad. He's had a very good season for Galatasaray, but there are obvious contexts similar to the Gyokeres situation, of course, in Portugal as well with that, playing for the best side in Turkey, and of course, scoring as many goals as he has in that league. I think there are off-field stuff that are there as well. Just do a little bit of Googling, you'll see it. that I think probably rule out. And the biggest one on top of all of that is the wages. The wage demands of Osimhen are huge. So, and I think go well beyond what Arsenal are willing to pay for him as well. Let's scroll up to Laughing Man says VG, Victor Gyokeres is the best striker available. He's been banging 20 plus goals for seasons. And he says, Tom, I can get why Arteta will want Sesko because he will suit our playing style. However, there is an expectation of the fans which he has not experienced, and Gyokeres has as a solo striker. Well, he has that in Portugal. Like we can go over this time and time again. The context will not change. Gyokeres is the bigger risk of the two, in my opinion. There's greater risk with the signing of Gyokeres than there is with the signing of Sesko. So let's see. As I said, I'm pretty torn. I'm slightly leaning towards Sesko over the two, but the riskier signing would be Gyokeres, in my opinion. Orange Juice says, how do we as a club pull off what City did with Haaland and Alvarez together? Surely we can get our main guy and find another gem in Alvarez as he was at River Plate. Very hard to do. If we're being very honest, Julian Alvarez, when he signed from City from River Plate, there was a lot of hype around him, yes, but there's been a lot of hype around young players coming from South America, and it hasn't worked out. So how do we do it? A lot of luck has to be involved. So it's all well and good having that example, but those examples are not far-reaching. Aston Villa with John Duran, another one, signed from MLS. Now, these are not very frequent examples of where these situations do happen. And can you imagine if Arsenal were to sign Gyokeres, great, but then add kind of a player that no one really has heard of? There would, I think, be some question marks being asked. Arsenal don't necessarily have to do that because they already have Kai Havertz at the club. I think Kai Havertz is very quickly forgotten. He is a very competent centre forwards. It may not be his best position, but he was tracking towards a 20-goal season this year for Arsenal before he got that injury. So we are very good number two if Arsenal, of course, do sign a centre forward anyway. And so for that reason, of course, having Kai Havertz as a number two is more than good enough. Nizakit says, we usually go for Prem-proven players. What do you think of the chances that we sign a Gibbs White or an Eze or a Morgan Rogers? I think there's a chance that Arsenal could move for a Premier League player in an attacking midfield role. I don't think Gibbs White. I don't think Morgan Rogers. Eze is a player I know Arsenal have an interest in. I know that he's a player that Arsenal have continued to watch. He, of course, used to be at Arsenal at a young age, but in recent seasons, they have been watching him. But he would be very expensive. And as I mentioned in part one, there is a consciousness around the pathway for players like Waneri and Dowman, of course, as well. So I think for that reason, there's a chance, but I think it's unlikely. I'd love to see Arsenal sign an attacking midfielder still, just to give them that depth. But I think it would need somebody like Eze, who is versatile, who can play in different positions, left 8, attacking midfield, left wide playmaker, 10. These are roles where I think that's definitely something that we could do with. But there is a consciousness of not blocking those pathways. Mashafik says, we need another creative midfielder. We have to play Odegaard whilst injury, and he needs competition. As we've kind of discussed that already. Jack says, instead of signing another number one and creating another Ramsdale Raya situation, wouldn't it make more sense to sign an already number two like a Jason Steele from Brighton, who is very good? Yeah, I think so. I think that's definitely the way I would go with my goalkeeper. Mickey says, don't want to be drawn into a debate of which players to buy. Arsenal has an abundance of resources like other clubs to do better than me or any other analyst, but there'll be no excuses next season. I agree. The Arsenal cannot be short next season. They cannot go into next season short. If Mikel Arteta at any point says we are short, that is an indication of failure this summer. If after the window closes, Arteta uses the words we are short, unless there has been a horrendous injury crisis of loads of players in one particular area, I'm sorry, but there is really very little excuse that could be raised next season. We know the dangers. We've experienced them this season. We cannot be putting ourselves in that position next season. And I have real faith that we won't. There's a real optimism, a real determined nature I feel about Arsenal this summer and how they're going to go into it and how they're going to approach it. And as I've said before, anything other than a 9 out of 10 window for me is not good enough this summer. Arsenal need to be as close to perfect in this summer transfer window as they can be. They need at least 5 players. Centre forward, wide player, defensive midfielder, defender, backup goalkeeper, minimum. If we can get the 6th being that kind of versatile attacking creative midfielder, amazing. Would love to see it. Would love to see that. But that would make it a 10. But I don't know if that's something they're going to do because, as I've mentioned before, and I've mentioned a number of times now already, they are conscious of the pathways. So that's where we're at. Matthew says 600 watching, 887 likes. Matthew, you must be behind, mate, because there's over 1,500 of you in the chat box at the moment this morning for our first transfer show of the year. Thank you so much for your kind support and your listenership. It is greatly appreciated. If you could drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, that would be so humbling indeed. So please do. We're doing this show every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Maybe this is your first time listening, wherever you've been. It's only episode 570 of like 2,000 odd shows we've ever done. So make sure you continue to tune in with us each morning. Amaral Gunner says, Tom, sorry if Arteta uses them words above. He needs to be held to account. I think that there is something to be said about if we talk about shortness next season at any point, that falls back on the club for not doing the job. Let's go. Jamie says, I saw Renee Sleggers on Monday outside the Emirates Stadium because I went to the Arsenal women's celebration event. I mean, what an achievement. I was there as well, behind the scenes, literally behind the scenes. I uploaded that photo of Mariana Caldente lifting the trophy from behind the trophy lift. It was a great experience. I spoke to Steph Catley after the game and asked her about Renee Sleggers and the work and the belief and the trust that she's grown in that group and that squad. And what a brilliant achievement. I hope that we can see similar vibes on the men's side next season. I hope there can be thousands of people coming out to celebrate a trophy lift next season. That would be amazing to see. Comp says Arsenal are going to at least 50 games next season. We need an Eze and a Cherky type player in attacking midfield with Ødegaard, Waneri and Cherky as options. Martin says, if you watch Arsenal, Vision, Elliot doesn't stop talking about Eze. Yes, he's a good player, but look how we play. He plays, they aren't a match. I disagree with you, Martin. I think Eze fits Arsenal very, very well. I think that he works in terms of his work rate's very, very good. I think he's really good in the transition. I think he adds some elements that we're missing. And that's the thing sometimes we have to talk about as well. Like, we can look at our system, we can look at what's good about it, but sometimes we look at a player, we go, I'm not sure they necessarily fit. That doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. And that'll go with Gyokeres, of course, as well. And he'll add things, of course, if we were to sign him that we don't currently have. Even though we might see players and we think stylistically they suit us a bit more, as I do feel with Sesko. I think the difference with a player like Eze is that a lot of the characteristics and traits that he has that we don't necessarily think fit are things that we need. We need a little bit of that extra factor outside the box. We need that danger of being able to shoot from outside, from range, and score goals of a nature we don't tend to score. I really like the way in which you could play on the left 8 for us at times where maybe Rice moves into the 6 or we rotate Rice out. I think there really is there's a lot of traits in Eze to play in a number of positions, not just in midfield, that would suit us down to the ground. So I disagree, Martin. I think Eze would be a good fit at Arsenal and would add a lot to the team. And says, are any top clubs linked to Eze? Well, other than us, as I said before, I am aware Arsenal have an interest in the player, but certainly there's key for that. Martin says, Tom, we need to rotate seamlessly and not have to adapt. I'm sorry, I disagree again, Martin. Arsenal need to have different abilities. If you have a seamless rotation, you don't change anything. If you're facing a team and you change a player out for another one that is just the same, you're not asking any different questions. So I don't think we need to rotate seamlessly. Arsenal need to rotate strategically, not seamlessly. Arsenal need to be able to rotate and change the way in which we approach games, make us less predictable, ask teams different numbers of questions, different types of questions. If you rotate seamlessly and just take one part out and put another part in this exactly the same, teams get wise to that. And teams have got wise to us. Teams have worked us out. We're not having as much success in recent seasons as we are this season in terms of goal scoring and chance creation because teams have worked us out. And so we need to be able to ask more questions. We need to be able to ask different questions. We need to have different options to be able to do that. If we have a young player who comes through the ranks and they don't seem to fit, are we just going to get rid of them because they don't rotate seamlessly? No. You have to adapt as well. You have to change. You have to open up pathways to be able to better cope with those types of players. Nwaneri is very different to the players that we've got, like Odegaard and Saka. Are you going to get rid of him because he doesn't rotate seamlessly with Saka or seamlessly with Odegaard? No. You need to have different players. Clive says, Eze's release clause is 68 million. Would you? If it doesn't impinge on other business, Clive, yes, I would. And I know Clive doesn't agree with me. We've had conversations about Eze already. And Clive, I think you mentioned you'd go for a younger option like an El Canous or somebody like that. But for me, next season is massive. Next season, Arsenal need some players this summer that can give them immediate impact. And while I'm open to the idea of Sesko as somebody who can grow, other signings like Zubimendi and Eze, for example, I think give Arsenal an immediate injection of guarantee. So I'm open to Sesko being something we grow more into, but the wide area, the centre midfield, the creative midfield, I'd like some immediacy in quality, in goals, creativity, whatever. So yeah, I would. If the release clause is 68 and we can do that and it doesn't impinge too much on what else we need to do, if we can sell Fabio Vieira for 20 million plus, that takes the edge off a bit. Tavares leaving, Lokonga leaving, Zinchenko maybe being sold, that can take the edge off some of the potential investment. Yes, I would do that 100%. Biko says, will you be having another phone in? I was looking forward to coming on, but had a Christian meeting at the same time as the show. I'm sure we will at some point throughout the summer. Yes, of course, we'll be doing phone-in shows. I'll try and give you more warning next time. Yesterday was more spontaneous, but thank you to our guest that called in yesterday. Jerome says the system can stay the same, but having different profiles that don't necessarily fit lets you become unpredictable. The system is simply a framework to play. And if you speak to Arteta, he will tell you that the system is not this one-dimensional thing. Arsenal's system is very fluid. The profiles, the shape, the structures, the formations. We might on paper have our best 11 and we might put them into certain positions, and we might do that in our preview shows. We might think of it as a 4-3-3. I've fallen into the trap of asking Arteta about the 4-3-3, and he has slapped back and said, we don't play in a 4-3-3 all the time. We don't play in specific papered formations. Arsenal are fluid. They change shape. They change structure. It's a very, very open, malleable thing. And that means that you can bring in players that you might not on paper think, oh, do they really fit? And they surprise you. So let's wait and see. Mayor says, we are fluid, but we move slow. We do. And that's because I think we've lacked key figures in the side this season. I think that's because we've lacked the obvious candidates. I think that's because Partey has not been as good progressively as a midfielder. I think it's because Saka's absence, Martinelli's inconsistency, the lack of a natural centre forward like Havertz to help certainly in transition. There's a lack of speed, I think, at times. Odegaard's form, of course, as well, has not been as good as we've expected, and that has slowed us down. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Bike Thief says, Man U have won trophies, pal, whilst Arsenal haven't. Feel free to swap places if you like being 15th in the league. Feel free to swap places with them. They've won trophies. They've done that, yes. But who's more likely to win a trophy next season? Arsenal or Manchester United? I know the answer to that question, and it's not Man United. Mickey says, Tom, what do you think of Cherky? I think we don't have such a skill set and input. I like him. That would be transformative. I also like Eze. I do like Cherky. I think he's been very impressive for Lyon. When you're in a team of the season and you're not a PSG player, that says something. So I do like Cherky. I think he is a talented young player. Man City have got interest in him, it seems, as well. But I think he is a talented young player, and I think would add quality to Arsenal's team. He's not my number one pick, but he's not someone I'm discounting either. Certainly not. Amarogana says, Tom, Partey has slowed down. If he signs another contract, how long before the injuries come back? There's always a chance that happens. And that's why I've always been skeptical of the idea of renewing. I listened to Clive talking on the Arsenal Vision yesterday about Trossard, about Partey, about renewal, about change. I'd keep Trossard for another season because his reliability and his attendance are excellent. He's always available pretty much. He very rarely suffers problems, Trossard. And I think that's a valuable asset to have in the team. Partey doesn't have that guarantee that he will be there, which is why I've always lent slightly on the side of if we can replace him. Especially because I have seen, even though I think it's probably been one of his better seasons this year, certain aspects of his game have definitely regressed. And I think that's evident in how we play. Warlord says, I'd get Milinkovic-Savic. I mean, that's not really a name that we've really heard too much about recently. You know, he's 30 years of age himself. Is that really a smart replacement for Partey? I don't think so. 4 years ago, sure, Milinkovic-Savic, great player. He's not really a DM either. You know, he's more of a box-to-box and Mikel Merino type midfielder. So not really the profile to replace Partey with. Lee says, how are Man City doing after spending 100 million in January? I don't know, Lee. I am not adept on the finances of Manchester City. I don't think anyone really is. So let's just wait and see what happens with City moving forwards. Aoife says, I don't know how you can be jealous of a club whose fans constantly complain about their owners, players, managers because they won a trophy. It's clear trophies don't make everything good. Indeed. TG says, Partey 1 year and one option. I think that's what will happen. If I was a better man, that's probably what I'd assume we're moving towards, but nothing agreed just yet. Daniel says, I get Sesko, but knowing he needs time, I'd sell Kai and get a more natural experience centre forward like a Watkins. I mean, selling a 6-year-old and bringing in Watkins, I don't think makes any sense. Daniel, for me, I don't think that makes too much sense from a squad building standpoint. Biko says, Tom, have you heard suggestions that Standards FC would rather have us be in the Europa League and win it than being in the Champions League? Yeah, that's raising those standards. I can't get behind it. People that say we should drop into the Europa League to win it now. Oh, dearie me. I mean, how inferiority complex do you want to go? Jack says, Gonzalo Higuain over Sesko and Gyokeres. Oh, we're bringing back Higuain. I mean, that is crazy. Positive well-being. Tom, can you tell us what happened in the Man City? We don't know what happened. Nothing's happened yet. We're still waiting on the verdict. So hopefully this year we get more clarity. But it's still going to go. You know, if it doesn't go the way they want, they can appeal it and it'll go on further. So that situation remains very open as well. Wazza says, Tom, wild transfer question, but given Pep said that he can leave in a worst case scenario, would you take Grealish? No, I wouldn't take Grealish, no. We need players on the up. We need players going in that direction, not players who are kind of here. We need players going up, doing better. That's why, Havertz was a risky signing. And if it weren't for injuries this season, I think he, would have been on for a 20-goal season. Without a doubt, the numbers were tracking that way. But I don't really want more projects. I want players that are going in that direction for me. Yeah, Jun says, it's like saying drop into the Championship to win that league. Yeah, feel free. Spurs and Man United tried their hardest to do that this season. They got relegated to the Europa League and won that BTEC competition. But, yeah, it's... It's funny how some people would just the inferiority to want to drop down a level to pick up a piece of tin. Like, I don't really get it. Matt G says, Tom, any chance that you could get Katie McCabe on a show just to sing the Black Stenia song? While I would love that, I'm not sure. Katie can be trusted on a podcast. Give her a microphone. You know what's going to happen. This is a family show. You got to remember at the end of the day. And says, is it bad? I'm dreading match day one. Everyone says Arteta's system has a lot to learn and people are going mad when any striker starts the season week one behind Havertz. It genuinely would be the most Arteta thing in the world for us to sign a centre forward and then Havertz starts on the first day. It wouldn't be a surprise. It wouldn't necessarily be the wrong thing if they're still adapting as well. So it would just be a very Arsenal thing to happen. Josh says, I've seen links of Mars Lewis Skelly in Madrid. He's really that good. It's just, at the end of the day, he deserves any link to big clubs, but he's going nowhere. Miles Lewis-Skelly is Arsenal through and through. He loves this club. He's had a brilliant season. It's a credit to him. It's a credit to his family. It's a credit to the club. It's a credit to the manager that have got us and him to this point. What a brilliant moment. Brilliant moment. Amaral Gunner says, Tom, if you could pick 2 players from the women's team, who would you pick? I'd go Russo and McCabe. I mean, it's Stina. Stina delivers in the biggest of moments. You can't. For me, as I always say, it has to be. She has to be the most underrated female footballer in European football. Stina Blackstenius always turns up in clutch moments, and she's turned up in the most clutch moment for Arsenal. So yeah, but you look at kind of what Arsenal need. You look at the wide areas in particular. Beth Mead 5 years younger on the left for Arsenal. I know she plays more on the right. That would have been great. Alessia Russo, yes, it's been really good. Caitlin Ford, it's reliable. Having those players in the team. Emily Fox, I mean, we already have some great right backs, but Emily Fox is amazing. Just watching her play, absolutely brilliant. Amberly Sistina makes me think that she's the Havertz of the women's team for all the stick that she sometimes gets. She's just clutch steadiest. She's amazing. She'll be offside 9 out of 10 times, but she's always onside when it counts. Absolutely. Thugs in the chat says this fan base full of excuses because we can't win. This guy Tom is one for excuses, loser mentality. I think Thugs might be one of those that wants to drop into the Europa League. I wouldn't describe that as winner mentality at all. But they never show up. We do phone-in shows. We did a phone-in show the other day. If you haven't watched it, go and watch it. I think that phone-in show was very, very, very enlightening. Very, very enlightening indeed. Comp says, at least if Arsenal win the Europa League, we get more winning experience. Don says, Tom, this whole Spurs having a better season is expected from content creators, but for Sky, etc., to jump on it shows that they jump on the YouTube content. It's changed. The media aspects have changed these days, and it's gone very, very baity, rage baity. That's just how it's gone these days. People grab onto these things. They know they get clicks. They know it gets attention. They know it goes viral. Say the most controversial things you can say. Stay on the air. It's as simple as that. It is as simple as that. TG says, how can we go through a season and watch a team lose 20 games and win low-graded cups and still have had a good season? I know. It doesn't make any sense. I have no issues in Crystal Palace being said to have had a better season than Arsenal. Crystal Palace had a better season than Arsenal. No doubt about it. Crystal Palace had a better season than Arsenal. But those that say that Spurs had a better season than Arsenal, that's just embarrassing. Imagine saying that your team that's lost 22 league games, and won a competition that had the teams ranked at the time 16th and 17th in the Premier League in the final, beat Butterglimt in the semis. The Europa League is just been tarnished by the changes to it. It had weight about it when the Champions League teams dropped into it. There was a real competitiveness about it. But it's just changed. It's just the League Cup is harder to win. The FA Cup is hard. The Community Shield is harder to win than the Europa League. It just is. I'd love for someone to tell me and explain to me how the Europa League is harder to win than the Community Shield. To be in the Community Shield, you have to have either won the league, won the FA Cup, or been the second best team in the country. To win the Europa League, you can finish 7th these days, beat Butterglimt in the semi-final, and then face the team ranked 16th or 17th in the Premier League to win it. That's, it's just lost all of its shine. It's lost all of its grandeur. It's like the UEFA Cup used to be just something you would it was a spectacle. It was something really special to win. But it's had all of that taken away from it. So yeah, I have no my care for that competition is just zero. Absolutely zero. Thomas says, what hurt is seeing Spurs lift the cup? Yeah, that's absolutely fine. if it's painful seeing that lot lift it. I absolutely get that. For the record, and I'll say this again, it's like I'd say this no matter who won it. If Bodo Glimt had lifted it, if Man United or Athletic Club had lifted that competition, I'd be saying this. It's not just because they won it. It's obviously bad timing because the first year, of course, with this, it's very fitting, isn't it? Like the first year the Europa League becomes this kind of wishy-washy competition. Those lot who finished with 22 league defeats win it. Like it's very, very ironic, but the Champions League is. I loved Elliot's tweet. I think was perfectly summed up. Congratulations on Spurs for finishing 37th in Europe this season, and that's what he described it as. And that sounds about right. So there you go. Bipes says the Community Shield is a trophy, not my words. I mean, Arteta thinks it is. I don't personally. I wouldn't say the Community Shield is something to put and stand by and say we've lifted a trophy this season. Arteta has. I don't agree with him. The Europa League is not a major trophy in the same way that Europa League is, for me, not a major trophy anymore. The League Cup, unfortunately, the League Cup has also gone through a process of really being kind of like far less now than the Europa League, of course. The League Cup has eclipsed the Europa League these days. But when it comes to the idea that the League Cup, when the reward for winning it is a UEFA Conference League place, that in itself doesn't help. The fact it has a two-legged semi-final doesn't help the League Cup. But it's a bigger cup than the Europa League now. It's much harder to win the League Cup than it is to win the Europa League. That's for sure. You can go into the Europa League now, and you basically are. I mean, next year's competitors. I mean, we can check now, can't we? Because obviously the leagues are now finished. The teams that will be playing in the Europa League next season in the Bundesliga will be Freiburg from the Bundesliga. And I think Mainz, who won the German Cup this year? German Cup final. Stuttgart. So it'll be Stuttgart and Freiburg. From France, it'll be Nice and maybe Lille. But I'm not 100% sure. I mean, I think there was an article on it. Who has? Let's just Google it. Who was qualified? I'm aware of the time. I have to shoot off in a second. Qualified for the Europa League. Which teams have qualified for the Champions League, Europa League, and Conference League? Let's find Europa. Is that from the Premier League, though? I think it is. It's a Premier League article. That's annoying. Let's see if we can find one that's got all of the teams. Teams Europa League 24-25. No, I want Europa League 2025-26. Okay, here we go. Scroll down. League phase. So Palace, Villa, Bologna, Roma, Betis, Celta Vigo, Stuttgart, Go Ahead Eagles, Lyon, Lille, Freiburg, Porto, Genk, Sigma Olomouc, Aberdeen, PAOK, Fredrikstad, Wolfsburg, Utrecht, Banik Ostrava, Braga, Hibernian, Young Boys, Anderlecht, and there's a few more. But a few of those are from like the playoff rounds and the qualifying rounds. Guaranteed next season are Porto, Freiburg, Lille, Lyon, Go Ahead Eagles, Stuttgart, Celta Vigo, Real Betis, Roma, Crystal Palace, Aston Villa, Bologna. Aston Villa should win that competition by an absolute canter. They should win it by an absolute canter next season, Aston Villa. If Aston Villa do not win the Europa League next season with Unai Emery in charge, it is a colossal failure. A colossal failure if Aston Villa do not win that competition next season. With that, like from sitting here on May 28th, knowing that they are the best team in that competition and will not be eclipsed by any teams dropping in because they can't drop in anymore, Aston Villa will have to win that competition. Have to win that competition. It would be a horrendous failure if they don't win that competition next season. Porto and Palace being kind of up there as other ones. Roma, of course, as well. Lyon to another extent. We've got the Conference League final, of course, soon. Chelsea are playing. When is that? Chelsea fixture. Is that tonight? Yes, it's tonight. So Conference League final tonight. Betis against Chelsea. Warra Trophy. Anyway, thank you so much as always for tuning in. Really appreciate your time. Hope you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful, and as always, up the Arsenal.